And we should be streaming. Let's have a look and see that we are live on my channel. Have a look and see that we are live on. Oh, there we are. Hello, welcome everyone. Hey, thanks for joining us here. I see that we are now live on my stream. So, hey, Thaddeus and Thunderous, just say hello so we make sure your audio is coming through well.
Hi, everybody.
Thaddeus?
Can you hear?
Hello. Hello.
Okay, yeah, looks like we are live. Yeah. Okay, guys, well, thanks for joining us. And yeah, we have quite a big audience here again, so thank you for jumping over from the previous channel. Chat with Thaddeus on Reasoned Answers. Okay, so everyone is clear. And I had a question in the channel about homosexuality. If you can just rephrase that, please. If you can just ask me that again, then I will try and answer that. But I have something prepared. Is there anything in the Reliance of the Traveler regarding homosexual practices of hubal in Islam? It wouldn't speak about hubal, but I will show you something from the scholarly works of the Ottomans. John Doe says, I still say the show should be longer. It's too short, and you know you've got a wealth of knowledge, so make them longer, not shorter. But then...
Can't satisfy everyone.
No, we cannot. No, we definitely cannot. Okay, right, everyone. So let me get back here. So I'm going to go to this. Oh, you know what's going to happen? It's going to go, yes, Reasoned Answers. Of course, I would need to resize you, Thaddeus, because for some reason your window has gone strange again. I do apologize.
I'm just itty bitty. It's all right.
Yeah, I'm really not sure what happened there. Yeah, let me try and figure this out. Reasoned Answers, there you are. You know what? I'm gonna just enlarge you. Then I'm going to try and do this live. Okay, you know what? That'll work for now. My apologies. Okay, guys. Yep. Everyone can see this. This is by Stephen O. Murray and Will Roscoe. It's available in my archive. You will find the links in the description box, but also if you go to my community tab, you'll find there are several articles just with the Sharia logo and about Sharia law, and you can download and find all of these references that I use in my archive. And it's guys, it's great to have all three of us here together. It's really fantastic. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you, Lloyd, for doing this, and also to Thaddeus. It's been a little while since we last spoke, so it's excellent to have an opportunity to have a discussion with you.
Oh, I mean, yeah, we should do this more often and build our channels. I've been neglecting mine because I've been on so many other channels. Yeah. Okay, so this book is called Islamic Homosexualities. It's available in my archive, and you can see this young, pretty boy here, right? And they speak of the culture, history, and literature. So Islamic homosexualities, and I'm going to just jump forward, okay? Introduction, the world not to know, the Islamic accommodations of male homosexuality. We don't want to know. Muhammad and male homosexuality, woman love in Islamic societies. Look, you don't have to believe any of this. Just read it, see for yourself. Male love in Islamic law in Arab Spain. So there might be or might not be a lot of research that has gone into this to discuss homosexuality in Islam, right? See male homosexuality inheritance rules. Okay, you know what? Too much already. Too much already. Let's just jump forward to the main piece here so that I skip over all this nonsense. But let's just say that homosexuality is not exactly a surprise in Islamic law or in Islamic culture. Now, please, you have children in the room. I hope you sent them out because this is going to be an adult show for a couple of minutes. But yeah, guys. Okay, the will not to know. We don't want to know. Now, I just need to say two words. Bachabazi.
I was going to say I've got a few episodes of Bachabazi on my channel, and perhaps, Lloyd, you can correct me on this, but the image that Islamic Allah's brothel gives once you get to that heavenly realm and got access and got the VIP entry, Isn't there a suggestion of little boys?
Of course, with
for,
dull eyes and sweet cheeks and pure, beautiful skin. Yeah, of course. Now, have a look at this picture. Have a look at this picture now. Look, if this was a woman, then these are men lining up, which is not a pleasant sight, or a thought that one would think would be, I don't know, something that would be present in a supposedly moral, religion. But notice here, as you'll read from this, it says, Thaddeus, what does that say?
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, my apologies. No, it says
lining up to use a boy.
And this is in the Topkapi Palace Museum in Turkey.
The thing is that the Islamic religion is very proactively critical of homosexuality and the practice of child abuse in the churches, and perhaps rightfully so. But it seems to be the originator of this practice when you consider the certain denominations that had catamites, and catamites were little boys kept for sexual purposes. So there are many things that seem to have their roots where Islam gets it from paganism, but a lot of the practices we find in the Western world seem to have their origins within Islam.
Agreed. I mean, we saw how pagan it is. It kisses rocks. I mean, why would they not carry this over? There's nothing that it's just pretty gross. Right. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. And feel free to download the book and read it for yourself. Check the facts. See if it. But I mean, why would Topkapi Palace in Turkey have this? Understand? This is just crazy stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Clearly, this is a religion of pure moral values, and anyone who says otherwise is just an Islamophobe. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Yeah, nothing to be questioned here, right? Nothing to be questioned. Yeah, so, okay, I'm going to jump forward a bit. So this is I've covered a couple of days ago with Thunderous. Do you have something you want to add before I move forward?
No, not at all. I was just going to make a snide comment that Islam was a religion of Pornhub.
Of course. I think it's fair. Halal fun, right? Yeah. So just to reiterate something that we did last time, a couple of days ago with Thunderous when I did my stream, sources of the law. Now understand, what's his face? This Zakar or whatever his name was, Nasar Khan or whatever, he was saying, we only follow the Quran and Hadiths. We only follow the Quran and Hadith. So I want to bring you back to this. At the Ibadah level, Muslims are only exposed to the Quran and some Hadith. Right? And he says, we only follow the Quran and Hadith. Well, isn't that exactly what I've been saying? That they only know the Islam for the masses, which is the Quran and some Hadiths. Right? And the scholars have knowledge above, and the higher scholars have more knowledge, and the further scholars have even more knowledge. Right? The Ibadah level, the level of the lay Muslim, Islam for the masses, is kindergarten Islam. Kindergarten Islam. It's Islam for kindergartners. Okay? It doesn't stop with the Quran and Hadith. It goes, well, the Muslim scholars call it, these are the roots of Islam. Now think of a tree. A tree has roots. Do you only study the roots, or do you finally look at the tree? Right? Because the roots are very minor, and then you've got this massive tree that grows out of it. This huge, huge trunk. And then you've got branches, then you've got twigs, and then you've got leaves. You have a massive tree that grows out of these little roots. And in other words, you're studying the roots and ignoring the tree. Any thoughts, Thaddeus, from you?
Yeah, there's two possibilities, I guess. Either Nasser was being honest and just revealing that he has no knowledge of what Islam, and he's just blindly following his scholars. And considering that he told us to go to Hamza, who is hardly an intellectual, that's a very real possibility. The other possibility is that he was simply lying, that he was pretending that he does have more knowledge, and he was pretending that Islam is just the Quran and Hadith. Either way, this is what the well-informed Muslims want us to believe. They want us to play this Quran and Hadith game. As long as we're talking about those two subjects, they can dance. They can say, it doesn't mean that, it means this. Then you say, okay, it means that, therefore this. And I go, oh, no, never mind, it means this. It can mean whatever you want it to mean, and they're well prepared to play that game. But when you change the dialogue, you make it about other things, you make it about Sharia, suddenly they go quiet. Suddenly they don't have any answers anymore because they're off script. And if they do actually have the knowledge, they definitely don't want to get it out there.
Right. Yeah. Anything from you, Thunderous?
Well, I was just thinking to myself, it's the same logic that they imply with that you have to read it in Arabic, but they themselves don't read Arabic, so they're impugning on you something that they themselves can't do. And what they don't realize with that is that the ceiling that they have above isn't a transparent glass ceiling in Islamic hierarchy of understanding is concerned. It's a concrete ceiling, so their vision can't penetrate what's going above. And what they don't realize is there are 7 ceilings or 8 ceilings or 9 ceilings above them, and they're only at the bottom end of the totem pole as far as their knowledge is concerned.
Exactly. No, thanks, guys. I mean, those are very, very valid points. So yeah, thanks, because it always helps to get different opinions than just my own, because you guys fill in blanks that gaps that I miss. Okay, the sources of the law. There are 2 main source categories for discovering the law. I'll run through this. We did this a few days ago. They are the revealed or the root sources. Now, this root is deliberate because it is taken from the idea of the Jewish tree of life. That symbolism of the Jewish tree of life, the menorah. It takes that idea from that. You've got the root, and then you've got the branches, and the whole thing spread from there. So the root creates this whole network, this forest. So it's not just the tree, but then the forest. So you've got the Quran and the Sunnah includes the Hadith plus the Sirah. As I said, the Sirah actually comes from the term Siyar, which is the wars of the Prophet. So his biographies are about his wars, right? His example is warfare, right? You'll find that is described in the Hedaya, volume 2. If you go to a chapter called the Institutes, chapter 9, the Institutes, Hedaya, volume 2, you'll see they'll say the Siyar, right? Which is the Sirah. Now, practical sources, Ijma, the consensus of the founding scholars. This is the most important source of law and authority in Islam. Then you have ijtihad, independent reasoning. This is almost exclusively the domain of the major scholars, who are all dead now. And the qiyas, comparison or analogy, applying something that you know to try and deduce laws for another situation. Right. The ijma is the most important of the sources of legal knowledge. It is the unanimous agreement of the scholars, not the community. It's the community of scholars. It is the unanimous doctrine and the opinion of the recognized religious authorities. And this ijma was set centuries ago. It cannot be changed. Right? Now, this is from the Encyclopedia of Islam. This is the index. This is the very short version. And of course, if you go to volume 1, page 259b, volume 2, volume 2, volume 3, to these pages, you will find far more detail. These scholars did what is called ijtihad mutlaq. Okay, the creative act of ijtihad through which the founding imams derived from the revealed sources, that would be the Quran and the Sunnah, sources a systematic structure of law. So the Sharia took about 800 or 900 years to be built, from the 7th century through to about the 15th century. The mutlaq means absolute. So these people did absolute reasoning, perfect reasoning. They cannot be wrong. If you guys want to say anything, just jump in, please. I'm just running through this because I did this a few days ago, but please say anything you'd like. Yeah.
What for the audience to understand, for any Muslim to understand, how, I think I may have asked this already previously, how do they reconcile the hundreds of years for this to be compiled? When you consider the Quran was already in heaven for millions of years before it comes to earth. It takes 20 years from the first ayah to the last ayah to be revealed, give or take a few lost ayah, chapters in the Quran. Muhammad himself says that the first 3 generations are the best of Muslims. So they have Muhammad with them for that. And obviously he's going to say that because they're the ones that were alive at the time. Why does it take, why is every process in Islam taking hundreds of years to put together? And the most important part of Islam, the Sharia, it takes several hundreds of years to compile. So what happens to the people in the interim? By that, what I mean is, if the period before Muhammad is called the Jahiliyyah, the period of ignorance, by implication then, from the 3rd generation passing away to the compilation of the Sharia, is that not some kind of Jahiliyyah in itself?
You know, that's a very good... Thaddeus, your thoughts before I mouth off here, please. Well, that's a very good set of questions.
Yeah, well, that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great point by Thunders there, that the period of ignorance apparently continued for a long time. You know, I don't know how the Muslim is going to respond, but of course the real answer is that Islam is not the Quran. Islam is not the Hadith. Islam is a system of political domination, and it was that from the beginning, and then they developed doctrine over time. They adapted doctrine in response to Christian polemics against Islam. They changed the biography of Muhammad in response to Christian polemics. because that was always secondary. It was always about a system of conquest, a system of taking land, a system of political power, and then they tacked a religion onto it to justify themselves. So fundamentally, Islam is the same as it's always been. It's about controlling others.
Absolutely. Objectively, from a non-Muslim observation, we can reconcile that, and you can clearly see exactly for what you've said there, Thaddeus. Exactly that. It was an evolving ideology in order for it to change, mold or adapt with incrementally as advancement was made with conquest. But that's from a non-Muslim point of view. But how does the Muslim reconcile this? This is their religion.
They're not supposed to question it. They don't ask that question. Don't forget. I want to clarify something that you said, Thunderous, and I want to correct it as well, because this is something. Look, Muslims have been made. Dawah is propaganda. It is political propaganda. Dawah technically is state propaganda. Okay, propaganda is obviously language designed to create some kind of outcome. And distortion, lying, etc., is all permissible, right? Now, the Jahiliyyah, we have been given a false understanding of the term Jahiliyyah. It does not mean the period of ignorance or the time of ignorance. We need to understand this, okay? Jahiliyyah is very strongly tied up with the concept of shirk, of associating partners with Allah, which is what Christians do. Right? So Jahiliyyah does not mean the period of ignorance. It didn't end, because the common thing that we are told is that Jahiliyyah ended when Islam came into the world. When Muhammad came in as a prophet, that the Jahiliyyah ended and Islam brought the gnosis, the knowledge, the wisdom. This is not true. In Islamic writings, the Jahiliyyah means the condition of ignorance. If you're not a Muslim, you are living in Jahiliyyah. You are suffering from Jahiliyyah if you're not a Muslim. You are in the condition of ignorance. The West is in the condition of ignorance because they are not Islamic states. Understand that. And Jahiliyyah and shirk go together, because shirk is something that happens from Jahiliyyah. You can only get shirk if you have Jahiliyyah. So Christianity comes out of the condition of ignorance. It comes out of the Jahiliyyah. Does that clarify? Does that make clear? This is deliberate. Muslims deliberately, the Dawah has deliberately lied to everybody, misinterpreted these terms so that you will be confused. They are not confused, but so that you get them wrong, so that you never have a proper understanding. Your thoughts before we go on?
Sophistry.
John Seventh Day asked a good question. He said, but how do the creators of this Sharia benefit from it, and why did they create such a thing? And they benefit originally by allowing themselves to continue their authority. You know, they've achieved authority through military conquest, but how do you sustain that long term? Well, you sustain that long term by controlling the minds of those who you are subjugating. So, you know, what's the benefit to the average person following? Nothing. What's the benefit to the creators? They get to control people. They get to prevent the possibility of rebellion.
Right. Thank you for that, Thaddeus. So understand, Jahiliyyah is not the period of ignorance in the past. Jahiliyyah is today. If you're not a Muslim, you are suffering. You are in the condition of ignorance. You are suffering from that state of ignorance. Shirk is a result of Jahiliyyah. Shirk comes out of the Jahiliyyah. And to end shirk, which is the worst crime against Allah, which if you're Christian, you're guilty of it, they must defeat shirk through jihad.
Yeah, exactly. Because you mentioned in the previous show to this one the word truth. Islam is truth. So by implication, what you're saying is everything outside of truth is a lie. That lie is through your ignorance, because it's not truth, and because you're in that lie, that ignorance, that is shirk, because you'll be doing something that is in Islamic parlance with the Sharia is shirk, because it's not truth or under the Sharia.
Yeah, well. Yeah, no, it's all a big mess. So guys, thank you, Dragon. Like, Sharia, and subscribe, please, if you don't mind. Okay, so let me continue here. Now, there are 4 roots which are known as the proofs of Islam. These 4 roots are the proofs of Islam. So the proofs of, actually a very good point from Bob Fisher, slavery and bondage, Islam, Jesus came to set us free from bondage. Actually, that's a very valid point, yes?
I was just going to ask, because Bob's just sort of pressed me for a thought I had earlier I was going to ask, and that is, are we not, in all of this, just going to what Thaddeus said about the evolving rules as conquest was taking place, are we not also watching an almost bastardized reinterpretation and reinvention of the Mosaic Law, which was a very visual, by implication, you could see if you're under the Mosaic Law by your actions, not by your faith. So it was a religion of a set of rules, rather than a relationship, which is what Christ was trying to free us from the bondage of the law, but have a relationship with God. But Islam, because they missed that point, they don't quite grasp that with their lens. They go back to the physical acts rather than the spiritual ones.
Well, good point. Anything from you, Thaddeus, before I continue?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
Cool. Okay, so the proofs of Islam refers to the proofs that the mujtahids rely on when they deduce and describe the rules of Islam. Now, these proofs are the Quran, which is divine scriptural revelation, the revealed source, as you will sometimes see them call it. Then you have the Sunnah, the oral tradition of Muhammad, which is the Hadith plus the Sirah. Then you have the Ijma, the main source, which is the consensus of the jurists. Thank you very much, Kitsune. Will Islam's final days be in Middle East or Europe? Look, people are, there's a saying, do not kick the tiger in its ass unless you have a plan for dealing with its teeth, right? And I'm going to say this based on historical precedent, but understand that Europeans have shown themselves in history to be very, very good at killing people on an industrial scale, and maybe certain groups should not push too hard, because if they do push too hard, they might discover that they've been kicking the tiger in the ass, and the tiger wakes up and it's got very, very sharp teeth. So I'll leave it at that. That's just my thought on the matter. So now, besides the ijma, the consensus of the jurists, which is the most important of these sources, right? Because the average lay Muslim in the comments section doesn't know anything. The qiyas is the next one, the juristic logical argument or comparative analogy, right? So then you are deducing a judgment for a case based on similarities to a case found explicitly in the religious text. So this is a matter of extrapolation, deduction, and so on, right? So these are the sources, Quran and Sunnah, but they don't contain everything that, direct answers to everything. So now, the difference of Sharia and fiqh, I've covered this, but Sharia is revealed and eternal. This is the explicit commands in the Quran, in the Sunnah. The fiqh is how to apply those things to things that are happening in the world today that are not explicitly, right? It's how humans understand the Sharia and how humans apply the Sharia. And the fiqh is derived from and constrained by the Sharia, supposedly. The Sharia comes from the Quran and the Sunnah. And this is true. Muslims will always say this. It's very broad and very general, whereas the fiqh is very clear and specific. It deals with very detailed issues. The Sharia can never be abrogated, cannot be changed, nor annulled. Notice the Quran is abrogated. Verses of the Quran are abrogated. Even the Hadiths are abrogated. The fiqh can change and adapt to new situations in the world. Any comment from you guys before I go on?
Yeah, I think that's a very helpful summary. The two terms are kind of used interchangeably often, and they're related, but they're different. So I think that this is very helpful here. And perhaps the key takeaway, of course, is that the Quran, while the Sharia may be based on the Quran, it is the final word. The Quran is not, because verses of the Quran have been abrogated. The principle was established, presumably to deal with contradictions in the Quran. But once the principle is established, then the scholars have the authority to say, this is abrogated and that's abrogated. And sometimes the words are not abrogated, but the meaning is, right? You've covered this in previous shows where the meaning has been changed without the knowledge of the person reading it.
Yeah.
So only the scholar can actually know what the Quran means. So you can say it's based on the Quran all you want, but it's really based on the Quran that the scholar has invented. The scholar has changed to mean what he wants it to mean.
Yeah, so that kind of abrogation is called the mantuk and the mafhum. So the mantuk says the sky is yellow. The mafhum says the sky is the sky is blue with pink stripes, right? That's the mafhum. In other words, the line says exactly what it says because they cannot go into the Quran now and change it. But it is understood to mean something else. It's no longer interpreted literally. It now has a completely different meaning, which they just casually forget to share with you.
Is it a case of convenience? It's sufficiently ambiguous for the sake of convenience, so that depending on where you're geographically located as a Muslim or trying to promote Islam, the language is sufficiently, undiscernible, because you can then use whatever kind of language you want, because the whole manifesto is predicated on deception and propaganda.
Yeah, no.
So the language.
Agreed. No, exactly that. Arkitsun, I like the tiger saying it's a South African proverb. It's probably sort of, no, tigers are not common in Africa. They're from India, so it's probably derived from something from the Orient, so yeah, it's probably just it's a bastardization of something from that part of the world. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to go into the reliance of the traveler, right? And we're going to talk about. We didn't do this the other day, right? Thunderous. We didn't do this one. Yeah. So today we'll cover scholarly consensus, and we're going to learn how important and how authoritative the scholars are in Islam. You're going to learn exactly the kind of authority that they wield and have wielded historically. And we're going to speak of the integrals. So we're going to go to reliance. Okay, we're going to look at a chapter called the validity of following qualified scholarship and the 4 integrals for validity. And this is in the reliance here. Right. Okay, so now we go to the reliance, and we're going to go to page 22 to 25. That's in the PDF, not the printed number on the page, right? That's the PDF, and 41 to 43. So 22 to 25 and 41 to 43. So I'm going to go here. Okay, so I'm going to start here. The superiority of sacred knowledge over devotion. Sacred knowledge is knowledge of the Sharia, right? Think of it as the gnosis, right? The Gnostic information. Nawawi, this scholar here, is the prime scholar in the Shafi school of jurisprudence. Shafi might have founded it, but Nawawi is the guy that's regarded as the scholar who refined it, perfected it, right? Yeah, Wesley. Yeah, someone's already deleted those comments of his, and if he says anything else that's stupid, just ban him. Now, Nawawi says, Allah said, are those who know and those who do not know equal? That's Quran 39:9. So the scholars are greater than those who do not know the Sharia, right? And only the knowledge. Okay, well, so we'll skip that. So Allah raises those of you who believe and those who have been given knowledge whole degrees. Now, don't forget, the jihadi is raised 100 degrees above the regular Muslim, okay? The jihadi is raised 100 degrees above the regular Muslim in paradise because of his deeds, because he fought in the way of jihad, in the way of Allah. He is raised 100 degrees. Well, you will learn here that the scholars are even above the level of the jihadis. Any commentaries? I see you smiling there, and others.
I'm just wondering, what does 100 degrees mean? Because 90 degrees is straight vertical. If you went to 100
well, and when you know 100 degrees,
out.
it's like, look, it's like think of a 100-story building. You're on the ground floor, and the other guy gets the penthouse.
But that's not 100 degrees. That's 90 degrees. And 100 degrees, that's when water evaporates.
They're not talking about temperature. They're not talking about angles. They're speaking of degree of reverence, degree of respect, a degree of...
Okay.
That's what they mean.
Yeah, it's just an arbitrary number. The point is that the jihadi is way above the average Muslim, and then the scholars above that.
But this is a book made clear, a book easy to understand, though, surely.
Yeah, well, yes, but notice the jihadi is beneath the scholars, and Sola Scriptura says, funny they use degrees like Freemasons. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of that's Freemason stuff going on. You'd be surprised. So notice, the Prophet said, whoever Allah wishes well, he gives knowledge of religion. So he gives them knowledge of the Sharia. And the superiority of the learned Muslim over the devotee is as my superiority over the least of you. So notice, the superiority of the Imam, the scholar, is as great over the lay Muslim as Muhammad's knowledge over the lay Muslim. Isn't that fascinating? And this is what the Prophet said. So don't call Muhammad a liar.
So basically, they've taken themselves and put themselves in the same position of Muhammad,
Correct.
this position of absolute authority, this position where you cannot be questioned.
Correct.
But there are over five. There are over five. I've never counted, but I know it's more than five. Where it talks about in the Quran whatever Allah and His Messenger have decided, which is where the 50-50 partnership comes in. So how do they reconcile the Quran with obedience to Muhammad and Allah at a 50% ratio, and they're saying that we are just as equal as Muhammad himself in the eyes of Allah?
Because they believe in,
how does
because you see, when the king is gone, look, remember Lord of the Rings, the king was gone, right? And Denethor, if I recall, was the viceroy. See, so in the absence of the king, the viceroy sits on the throne. The viceroy runs things until the king comes back. So until Mo comes back, these people are the viceroys. They're the ones who must oversee the world and implement the plan. So notice they say here again, okay? So the superiority of the learned Muslim over the devotee is like the superiority of the moon over all the stars. Odd that they chose the moon as the symbol here, the moon as the imagery.
But the Quran does not say this. The Hadith do not say this. And Muhammad himself says that the first three generations.
Well, the Hadith are obligatory to believe. Well, I'll get to that. I'll actually show you. So the learned are the heirs of the prophets. The prophets have not bequeathed dinar or dirham, not money. In other words, the prophets did not give us money. They left sacred knowledge, and the scholars who take it has taken an enormous share. So you see, the imams, these imams that founded the Sharia, the great imams, the great scholars, they are the continuation of the line of the prophets of the Bible. In their own words. Yeah, the stewards, exactly. Denethor was the steward, and these guys are the stewards of Muhammad. They must carry on his work. They have his authority. So any comment on that, guys? Before I don't.
Well, just real quick, it is in quotation marks here. So are they quoting from another work?
Hadith.
Sharia,
in theory, they should be quoting from a hadith. When it's quoted like this, it should be hadith that's quoted, or a famous saying from the scholars. But it should be hadith that's being quoted.
So in theory, they're quoting Muhammad's words here, that they're making this assertion that Muhammad established this principle. So that's how they would justify it. They would say that Muhammad set this up, so this is the way it should be. We're only following his teaching. We're not inventing something new.
Correct. We're just
But for that to be sure, there was and there was any truth in that. My concern is that they're not actually quoting the hadith. They've put it in parenthesis, the hadith. Or the words, but they're not giving you the location of what the hadith is.
That is very common. Within the Sharia manuals, they will commonly, this is not meant for lay people to get, they don't want to give too much away. This is, if you know, you know. So understand, they very rarely will give references.
But does that not imply then that they can insert their own opinions or their own agenda within that, but by doing that?
Well, it's intended to only be read by a scholar. So the assumption would be the scholar would know what's being quoted. They don't have to tell you.
Well, it's not. Remember, this is meant for the lay Muslim as well, but it's not meant to be questioned. You're just meant to believe it. Notice, a single learned Muslim is harder on the devil than 1,000 worshippers. So one lay Muslim is worth at least 1,000 worshippers. Understand? So these are very important people. Understand? Now, okay. He who goes forth to seek sacred knowledge is in the way of Allah, which is synonymous with jihad, until Allah returns. So notice that those scholars are jihadis, you see? And this is very odd what it says here. This is Gnostic, where Islam says this world and what is in it are accursed, except for the dhikr of Allah, which is the remembrance of Allah, the prayer, the rituals, the mantras, right, of prayer, the remembrance of Allah, that which Allah loves, and someone with sacred knowledge. The scholars have the sacred knowledge, the Sharia. See, so everything in the world is cursed, just like what the Gnostics believed, except for someone with knowledge of the Sharia. Right? Any comment, guys, before I move on?
No.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, now notice the religious scholar is greater in reward than the fighter in the way of jihad, who fasts the day and prays the night. So the scholar is even greater than the mujtahid. This is a greater way to Allah. These are greater in knowledge. right? So understand, this is the level of the scholars here. Okay.
Is that where Jesus turned around and said, made a comment about that you make them proselyte and they're worthy of Gehenna twice as much as you? And that is that in a kind of same text as the scholar is worth more because the scholar is the one that creates the fighter. So the scholar would be because he's creating the fighters.
Probably he's the general in command. He's the captain, the general. Yeah. So don't forget, an imam is allowed to order a political assassination. Don't forget, an imam can order a political hit, which is why you'll find that the imams at the mosques are often responsible for these things, because they are allowed to order someone be killed. Right? Teaching sacred knowledge for a brief time is better than spending a night in prayer. Right? So understand, this is how important sacred knowledge is. Now let's continue. 41, 20. Let me see, I need to go, just double check here. I need to go 22 to 25. Let me finish. Scholars are the heirs of the prophet, while devotees are not characterized as such. See, the great scholars of Islam are the heirs of the prophets. They're the descendants of the prophets. They speak with the authority of the prophets. Isn't that interesting? Right? I'd say that's pretty explicit. Then sacred knowledge, meaning the knowledge we're discussing, is a communal obligation. Oopsie, sorry about that. Let me just turn that off. And Juwaini says in his book that the communal obligation is superior to the personal obligation in that the person performing it fulfills the needs of the Islamic nation and lifts the obligation from it. In other words, the prayers of an individual Muslim are required for that Muslim. That's his duty to Allah. But his prayer only works for himself, whereas when the scholars pray, because prayer is known as Fard al-Kifaya, it's communal obligation and duty. And when the scholars pray, their prayer uplifts the entire Muslim ummah. Their prayers outweigh those of all of Islam. Yes?
A bit like the priesthood and the Day of Atonement and such. So it's basically just a grafting on of something that had happened previously.
I'm not familiar with that, though.
The nation of Israel had the high priest pray on there about offer sacrifice.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, this is a continuation of that. These guys pray on behalf of the nation. So their prayers intercede. They intercede with Allah. And whereas the obligation of the individual is restricted to himself, whereas if this guy doesn't pray, all of Islam falls into the hellfire. Any thoughts from you, Thaddeus?
I don't know if now is a good time to point it out or it'd be better later, but what I've been thinking is at the one hand, the scholars are talking about how superior they are to the average Muslim. And then in other places, we've read how they also have laws that forbid anyone from learning the sacred knowledge, that they say it's much better for the average Muslim just to blindly follow. If he gains knowledge, he might accidentally start doubting Islam and leave Islam.
Yes.
So not only have they set themselves up as vastly superior, they've also set it up so that you're discouraged from becoming one of them. Actually,
that's a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point. So, yeah. So the next bit here, are we keeping up with all the comments?
Yeah, I just want to comment what Major Gillard has just said, that their system makes each one of their religious leaders a demigod, and in fact more powerful than Allah, since Allah is silent, while these demigods get to have their ways and sayings.
Well, yeah, they speak with the authority of Muhammad, who is the equivalent of Allah in the Sharia. Yeah. So, I need to just, oops, wrong one. Turn that off. Oh, okay. So now we're going to talk about scholarly consensus, this ijma that is the most important source of authority in Islam. Okay? And this is the agreement of all the mujtahids of the Muslims, okay, after the Prophet's death, right, about a particular ruling regarding a matter or an event. It may be gathered from this that the integral elements of scholarly consensus are four, without which it is invalid. So all mujtahids of the Muslims in the period of the thing or event agree on its ruling, regardless of their country, race, or group. Non-mujtahids are of no consequence. The opinion of a non-scholar, of a lay Muslim, is irrelevant. It has no importance in Islam. So for lay Muslims, understand your opinion is of no consequence. Yes, Thaddeus?
Yeah, and as I say, an example of an opinion of no consequence would be the kind of comments we get on YouTube. We get these Muslims telling us that, we're wrong, we don't know what we're talking about, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, again, there's two possibilities. One, they're actually ignorant, and 99% of Muslims are by design not aware of where these things come from. They're aware of the things, but not aware of where they come from. Or they're purposely lying. Either case, their opinion is of no value unless they are a scholar.
Yeah, correct. So, yeah.
I want to read a comment from John Seventh Day. He said that reading all this makes me feel ignorant. Islam does a lot of things in the background, and that's true. And that's so. Why are we bringing this out, right? Sometimes people will say that most Muslims don't know this. This is irrelevant to the average Muslim, and so on and so forth. You're not talking to them at their level. And that's kind of the point, right? We want to be at a higher level than the average Muslim. We don't want to address the average Muslim at their level. We want to be the person with knowledge, the person who is teaching them what is actually going on in the background that they might not be aware of. When we're only talking them at the Quran and Hadith level, we're addressing them at a level they're prepared to defend because they've been given defenses against that. We can look at them and say they suck, they're not very good, but they are prepared to say something, and saying something's good enough. When you talk to them at a higher level, then they're not prepared to respond, and then they might just start ignoring you and go away. That's a possibility, but the other possibility is they say, wait a minute, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. He's actually bringing up things I'm not aware of. Maybe I should pay attention to what he has to say. And that's what we hope happens here.
Can I just add on to what you've just said there, Thaddeus?
Yes.
That many people may consider that this is maybe material that they may question because it's not irrelevant. But the thing is, you see, when Islam spreads with people at the bottom end of the totem pole, at the Quranic Hadith level, even if they're that level, and they're not, as you've said, 99% of them aren't. But when Islam spreads, it spreads at that level. They're the ones that go up and go into the other countries, set up the communities. And what happens is, after a decade or two or three of their presence and the Islamic community growing, in comes in this material later. It's almost like they go sow the bed, they set the seed and set the ground foundations working first of the community, and then these laws and principles come in later. So you'll find in Western countries, for instance, those that live in the UK, decades ago, you didn't have people walking around saying Sharia police, controlling areas that in a location that they're actually an indigenous location, setting up a precedence as to what can and cannot go on in that community. That happens once the community has been established, then the law comes in later. So some may consider this material not relevant now, but at some point in the future, as is taking place in certain European countries at the moment, particularly France, Germany, and England, this material is actually very relevant.
Right. Actually, correct. There's a few things. I'll just jump on. Yes, the Sharia comes in later. Strict Sharia comes much later. Once the community grows to a certain size, has enough money, then one of the countries, Saudi, Qatar, Iran, whoever, Pakistan, they will all compete to send an imam down there, build a mosque, and get the allegiance of those people. Once there's enough money, once there's enough people, then they'll say, okay, now guys, time to follow the rules, follow the book. Right.
Exactly.
And then also, Magic Gillard says lying is obligatory in Islam, and that is true. That is 100% correct. I have detailed shows on that. Have a look. I have a detailed show on lying in Islam. It's on Thaddeus' channel, it's on my channel as well. So just search for obligatory lying in Islam. You'll find it. And yeah, so let's continue here. Let me see if there's anything else. Okay, the ruling agreed upon, right? The Sharia ruling, the Ijma, the ruling agreed upon is an authoritative part of sacred law that is obligatory to obey. It is not lawful to disobey. Nor can mujtahids of a succeeding era make the thing an object of new reasoning, of new ijtihad, because the ruling on it, verified by scholarly consensus, is an absolute legal ruling which does not admit of being contravened or annulled. It cannot be contradicted, it cannot be changed, it cannot be made to go away. This is the power of the Quran is abrogated, Quranic verses are abrogated, but the Sharia can never be. It is more important. All right? The proof of the legal authority of scholarly consensus is that just as Allah ordered the believers in the Quran to obey him and Muhammad, two, he has ordered Muslims to obey those of authority, the Ulu al-Amr among them, saying, O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the Prophet and those of authority among you. Quran 4:59. The scholars are of the same authority as Muhammad. Any comment before I go on?
Yeah, I mean, we've been through this a couple of times, but it bears repeating that the scholars are the new Muhammad, that they're the new ruling authority. And today's scholars are dependent on the previous scholars. So it's like each successive generation has less and less authority to change things because more and more things have been established. And once something's established, it can never be changed. So it's like the original king, Muhammad, sets some rules, and then the next king sets some more, and then the next king sets some more. And over time, all the things are built up. And now today's scholars, they tell us things about, like, you know, the proper way to use the internet, or rulings on specific people who are alive today, but they have no authority to change any of the fundamental beliefs of Islam. People talk about reforming Islam, that the only reform in Islam is to go back to the original teachings and discard any modern add-ons. There is no Islam becoming more peaceful. Reforming Islam is making it more like what Muhammad taught, which is exactly what we associate with the opposite of reformed Islam. We say, oh, that's the corrupted Islam, is the violent. No, that's the original Islam. That's what the reformer goes back to when they reform Islam.
Yeah. Someone's asking, how do you become a scholar? You go to university, you study. Study for 3 to 7 years, depending how far you want to go. You can become a judge, you can become a fatwa expert, a sheikh, and you just have to learn what the previous scholars did and just repeat that. And that's basically it. You don't do anything fresh. You can apply. So what is the law related to cell phones? Can kids have cell phones? Well, you now have to look at previous examples and you can come up with ideas like that, but you don't make new laws because the previous laws are fixed. So notice it says here, when those of authority and legal expertise, the mujtahids, agree upon a ruling, it is obligatory in the very words of the Quran to follow them and carry out their judgment. Allah threatens those who oppose the messenger and follow other than the Muslims' way. So the Quran says, follow those scholars. Whoever controverts the messenger after guidance has become clear to him and follows other than the believer's way, we shall give him over to what he has turned to, and we will roast him in hell. How evil an outcome. The scholars are the ones who give you guidance. Consult a scholar. Yes, Thunderous?
Fear Allah, obey us.
Yes, correct. A second evidentiary aspect is that a ruling agreed upon by all the mujtahids in the Islamic community is in fact the ruling of the community. Right? And the community is divinely protected from error. The scholars cannot make a mistake. Now, the Muslims love to tell us the scholars were wrong. The scholars were wrong. No, I'm right. Listen to me. I am random Muslim 69 in the comments. Listen to me. Don't listen to the scholars. The scholars were mistaken. The community shall not agree on an error. This is a hadith. Okay? This is in the Quran, sorry. Right? And Allah is not wont to make my community concur on misguidance. Thus, that which the Muslims consider good, the Muslims here being the scholars, Allah considers good. Yeah, any comments from you guys?
I'd just say the majority opinion of the scholars is the definition of truth. It is impossible for the scholars to be wrong, because according to Islam, that's how truth is defined. And then you got the random Muslims saying the scholars are wrong. Obviously, they're either ignorant or they're lying.
Yeah, exactly. Now notice another hadith that scholars quote for evidence of their authorities, the validity of scholarly consensus, is the following. The Prophet said in the hadith, Allah's hand is over the group, and whoever dissents from them departs to hell. So these are the stewards of the Muslims, the Ummah, and whoever departs from their opinion departs to hell. So, meaning that whoever diverges from the overwhelming majority, and that is the ijma, the overwhelming majority opinion, concerning what is lawful or unlawful and on which the community does not differ has slipped off the path of guidance, and this will lead him to hell. So let me see if there's anything further. So other than the four Sunni schools of jurisprudence, okay, those schools, anyone other than the four Sunni schools of jurisprudence, the Hanbali, Hanafi, Maliki, and Shafi, they do not necessarily play a role in scholarly consensus. And there is scholarly consensus on it being unlawful to follow rulings from schools other than those of the four imams. So any other school than those four are meaningless. Any thoughts before we go on?
I just find that statement quite humorous, that the four schools agree that if you follow something other than them, it's obviously wrong. I mean, of course they're going to agree to that.
Yeah, true. And then the scholars, you see, but these scholars have achieved safety from textual corruption and have been able to discern the genuine from the poorly authenticated. This is what sets them apart from the smaller schools, because they've got so many scholars of such great knowledge that they were able to work their way through what was false in the hadiths and false in the texts of the scholars, and therefore they know that they all agree because things are good. Right? And there you go. So that finishes that portion in the reliance of the traveler. And so the ijma is the agreement of all the mujtahids, okay, as we've covered. Non-mujtahids are of no consequence, okay, and it's obligatory to obey the scholars. And if you deny the ijma, so if a Muslim denies something upon which there is scholarly consensus, the ijma, which is known as being of the religion, that Muslim thereby becomes an unbeliever, a kafir, and he is executed for his unbelief. I'll let you guys say something.
I'll let
Thunderous
speak. I've been speaking enough.
No, I'm just trying. I'm actually reading that paragraph again in disbelief. I'm reading that paragraph in my state of kuffar.
Yeah, this is what the scholars say. I mean, this is what the scholars actually say. This is their authority. So if a Muslim doesn't follow the scholars, now of course he's allowed to lie. I mean, for the good of Islam.
This is. At what point are these, just to go back to the quote that was made in the comments earlier on, at what point are these not demigods? And at what point is this not shirk, when you're putting the words of a man equal to that of Allah, in fact, above Allah, because Allah himself hasn't come and defined these terms himself. He's had a book in heaven, in his brothel, for millions of years. He reveals it. It takes 20 years to reveal that book. Muhammad's been around as a prophet for only 20 odd years himself. 900 years later, we get all this information, or is it 700 years later?
900 years, yeah.
900 years, we get all this information. At what point is holding a sheikh or a scholar to this kind of level not kuffar or shirk in itself?
Well, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, that is.
This is the religion of pure. And how many scholars are there in the world, and how many sheikhs are in the world in this religion of pure monotheism?
Who knows? But the thing is, it's this pyramid. It's a pyramid, and there's fewer and fewer as you go up. So these guys are effectively the ruling class, the elite within Islam. It's this pyramid of control. So guys, I'll finish here with this. I'll cover these slides again. I'll repeat them in the future, the next time we do a show. But I will talk about the mujtahids mutlaq. You've heard now about the ijtihad mutlaq, absolute reasoning. So the mujtahids mutlaq are the absolute experts, right? The four scholars, Hanafi, right, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali, right? Those four schools of jurisprudence. Those are absolute scholars. Now, an absolute expert in Islamic legal reasoning is a mujtahid mutlaq, such as Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, or Ahmad. And they're obliged to know what relates to every subject matter in sacred law. So these scholars are absolute scholars. They have absolute perfect knowledge. So understand that. These scholars are absolute scholars with absolute knowledge. So I'll end here today. Any thoughts from you guys before, as we wind down? I'll put the floor open to you guys and take any questions that are in the comments.
There's one question by John Seventh Day. It says, just a curious question. Do you guys think that Muhammad himself could have liked a Sharia, or did he aim for such laws in his lifetime?
The need.
I think my personal opinion, he just freestyle it for whatever circumstance he found himself in.
I would think that would be the case, although as they became an empire, as they grew, they needed to have a set of cohesive laws because they had a bunch of regional law, right? There's a fourth. I do not discuss it in this series, but there's another kind of law in Islam called Qanun. Okay, there's another kind of law in Islam called Qanun, which really means canon law. Canon law is not church law in this case. Qanun, effectively, the term comes from Roman law, right? Qanun, canon law. So this is basically cultural practice. Cultural practice, right? And basically, to accommodate everybody, Islam said that what you do in your culture is considered legal. So what is common in your culture, we will absorb into the Sharia, and thus what you do is considered normative in Islam, right? And this is one of the 5 maxims of Islamic law, that cultural practice. Give me 1 second. Cultural practice has the weight of law. Muslims will always say that, that's not Islamic, that's cultural. The problem is that according to Islamic law, if it is cultural, it is Islamic. So bachabazi is not cultural, it's Islamic.
But culture is regional, not universal.
Correct. But they needed to absorb everyone without friction. They need to harmonize all this. So they said, okay, well, if that's part of your culture, we'll stick it in here. It's good to go.
But what if your one culture that it's absorbed and grafted in contradicts another culture that they've grafted in?
They had to sort certain things out, but certain things would have caused too much of a ruckus, so they just let it go. That's why Muslims remember in the book it says, remember what it says here? What does it say? The will not to know. Don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
You don't want to know, so don't ask. Let's just look the other way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yen Yen says basically the Muslims are not following Allah. They're following the scholars who came thousands of years after the man, who were not even there from the first place. And that, to a fair degree, is true. And Muhammad is actually following Yemeni law, believe it or not. A lot of the stuff is old Yemeni law. It's old pagan law. Thaddeus, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, just to go to what you just said in that comment about Muslims not necessarily following the teaching of Allah or Muhammad. Well, I think that's something that you should be using in your conversations with Muslims, pointing out that very central, important ideas that they follow are not found in the Quran. They're not found in the teachings of Muhammad. They're things that have been added to Islam over time. And, ask the person, do you actually believe, are you actually following the words that you claim are your gods, or are you following the words of human beings? And if you take people down that line, I think you can start to open their eyes. And when they realize that a lot of what they follow doesn't come from the Quran or Hadith, they'll start to say, well, what about the other stuff? What about the small percentage that does follow? What basis do I have to believe that that is actually from God, as opposed to from these human beings who've proven that they're not afraid to make up stuff to put their own laws on the same level as the supposed law of God? So I think it can be very useful and productive. And back to what I said earlier, you want to be at a higher level than the Muslim you're talking to. You don't want to lower your knowledge to their level. There's definitely benefit to talking where someone is, but you don't want to get into that debate. You don't want to get into the debate if the Quran says this is what it really means, because they can always just pretend it means whatever they want it to mean, because there is actually so tiny little material in the Quran that they can just make it say whatever they want to say and pretend that those 6 words that are there, that they mean exactly the opposite of what they appear to mean. And you're just stupid because you don't agree with the scholars, and they don't have any clue what the scholars say. They just know they're supposed to appeal to the scholars. Then you show them what the scholars actually say, and they say, you're lying. You're making stuff up. But so they have escapes, but I think it's very productive to go down this line. As long as you're talking to them at that base level, you never get anywhere. They always just say the scholar knows better than you.
Yeah, unless you quote the scholar, and then it's like the scholar's wrong. You need to listen to me, the lay
Yeah.
Muslim. So I just give me a second, Thunderous, please. Thank you very much to Brian Johnson for the donation. Wow, thank you very much. I'm very grateful. I'm really appreciative. Thank you again. I'm glad you found this informative. And there was a question. Someone asked, why is the doctrine of Sharia under the title Reliance of the Traveler? No, this is just one Sharia. There are thousands of Sharia manuals, but only a handful have become authoritative over time. So within the 4 schools, each will have a few manuals, half a dozen or so, that within that school are authoritative for that school. But certain scholars are major scholars. So within the 4 schools, they might all go to one book written by one scholar, which has become the authority on a given topic. Specifically, though, the Reliance of the Traveler has become the most popular Islamic law manual in the world, in Sunni Islam. Reliance of the Traveler means you were traveling. You were away from your village, away from your imam. You were on the road, right? You're on your camel and you're going to be gone for 50 days. So you needed a book to help you stay true to Islam, to follow the rules. So the full name is The Reliance of the Traveler and the Tools of the Worshipper. So this was a little compendium, a mini encyclopedia with a little bit of everything. It's the only book of its kind in Sunni Islam that has a little bit of everything. And so you can find almost anything you want in it, and then it will tell you where to find more detailed information if you need it. But it will tell you that this exists, go look over here for more, go look at that scholar to get more detail. And so it was something for travelers. It's like taking your Bible with you on the road, you see, because Sharia would normally be 6 or 7 volumes or 4 volumes and thousands of pages. But the Reliance was a few hundred pages at the time, 600 pages to 1,000 pages. It was small enough for one person to carry with him. And using that, you could then take care of your own needs or those of your traveling companions in the caravan or whatever. Hopefully that answers. So guys, we should end here. Any last word from you guys?
No, thank you.
I'll just say, go ahead, Thunders. I'll let you go first.
So I was going to say thank you, Lloyd, for a wonderful presentation, and thank you, Thaddeus, for joining us. It's been a pleasure to be with yourself this evening as well. And to the audience, I'd like to thank them for their contribution.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Thunderous, Thaddeus, last word.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me on. Not everyone saw the first part of this. The first part of this was on my channel. Independent material, but related. We looked at Islam as a system of political domination. And in that, I asked for feedback on this format that we're trying out, these somewhat shorter, I mean, short is relative. So for some people, 5 minutes is a long video, but shorter compared to the 2 or 3 hours shows that we're doing. So let us know what you think of this format. Let us know if it's helpful. And if you're interested in more and you didn't see the first part, head over to my channel and check that out.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Thaddeus, for coming on. Thank you, Thunderous. Good to be with you guys again. I'm sure we'll do this again. And guys, we'll set up another talk like this. I'll continue the Sharia talk in the week. And see you guys in the comments. And we'll catch you guys soon. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Good night. God bless.
God bless.
Bye-bye.